Hello and welcome to a very special show on the Dettol NDTV Banega Swasth India campaign. From the early days of the HIV epidemic to the current coronavirus crisis, a major challenge has been dealing with the stigma that comes with these infectious diseases. As the world battles coronavirus, some of the most vulnerable are the people living with HIV and the marginalized communities like the LGBT community, the lesbians, gays, bisexuals and transgenders. Today we speak about why it is extremely important for us to ensure that they are not forgotten. Joining me to discuss on this, we have Ashok Rao Kavi. He's the founder and former chairman of Humsafar Trust and editor Bombay Dost. We have Lakshmi Narayan Tripathi, transgender activist and chief of the Kinnar Akhada. Dr. Rajesh Gopal, additional project director, Gujarat State AIDS Control Society. Ravi Bhatnagar, Director, External Affairs and Partnership, AMESA Reckitt Benckiser. Drs. V. Sam Prasad, Country Program Director, AIDS Healthcare Foundation, India Care, and Prince Manvendra Singh Gohil. He's the chairperson of Lakshya Trust. The Global AIDS Report was released on July 6th this year, and we had recently spoken to Winnie Byanyima, the Executive Director, UNAIDS. She spoke about how India has fared in this report and what we can learn from HIV response in the fight against COVID-19.
From India, the positive news is that you've been able to bring down new infections in the last 10 years by 38%. So you can do it. You have 2.1 million people living with HIV, but you've been reducing even the deaths. You've reduced the deaths, AIDS-related deaths by 56%. So good progress. Where do you need to make more progress? It's on pregnant women. Pregnant women, following them through and ensuring that they are put on treatment if they are positive and do not transmit to children. You need progress there. You also need to make progress on what we call key populations, marginalized groups. These are sex workers. These are transgender people. These are gay men. So you need to do more there. But India also produces 80% of the total antiretroviral treatments globally. That's huge. So India needs now, in the context of corona, not to drop the ball on producing and supplying antiretroviral treatments, because so many countries around the world depend on Indian production. We've been fighting HIV for the last 25 years as UNAIDS. 40 years the virus has been with us, and we know what works. Putting communities at the center of responses is critical. So for example, today with coronavirus, it's so important that you allow communities themselves to define what social distancing means for them in urban slum dwellings, in rural areas, what hygiene practices will work in contexts where there's no water, for example. So importance of communities. Secondly, it's so important that the approach is multisectoral. An epidemic is not just a health issue. It's an issue that it's a health issue being driven along the cracks of inequalities in society. So it's about tackling those social and economic inequalities in human rights that will then bring you to stop the epidemic.
So Dr. Rajesh, let me come to you first. You have been working in this sector for over 20 years. What are the lessons that we can learn for COVID-19? How can we deal with COVID-19 and what can we learn from the HIV response here?
The various lessons that we have learned from the viral pandemic of AIDS are very loud and clear. And as a writing on the wall, they need to be incorporated in our endeavors for containment of COVID-19 also. If we want to succeed in our pursuits of containment of COVID-19, the community has to be at the center. That is the single most important lesson that we learned from our interventions for prevention and control of AIDS. Any intervention has to be community-based, community-led and community-directed. Community has to take the entire responsibility. I'll give you an example of a particular community of PLHIV. people living with HIV. In this COVID-19 times, when there was lockdown, there was limited transport, people were not allowed to move out. The community of HIV positive people in our state of Gujarat ensured that all the people who need antiretroviral drugs, those are the drugs given to AIDS patients, people who have HIV infection on a regular basis. Because we all know that AIDS is a chronic manageable disease, just like diabetes or hypertension. We cannot cure, in the sense we cannot eradicate diabetes or hypertension from a person just by giving some medications, but we can definitely control and the person can live a near normal life.
Dr. Sam, now I would like to come to you here. You have been working in the HIV sector again for close to 20 years, and the parallels between HIV, AIDS and COVID-19 are substantial. They are both novel they're both novel viruses. They can spread rampantly through pre-existing social networks. Both the viruses have highlighted how outcome disparities arise from healthcare system failing to protect the marginalized communities. And most importantly, in both the pandemics, fear and stigma have spread in parallel with these viruses. What is your take on this, Dr. Sam?
I think, all that you were introducing the topic and this question was right, and there are similar and parallels, between the two viruses. What's comforting is, though, that, there are a couple of interventions over the last 20 years that we were able to do as part of civil society, as part of NACO, as part of, many other bilateral donors that have really put India back on track, and then we are able to sort of, work towards ending the epidemic, the HIV epidemic by 2030. Having said that, also, this is also a time when, the COVID-19 has put all of us on one platform. I think, it's an equalizer, I should say that. And the challenges are immense, especially for those communities who are at the fringe of, our mainstream communities, especially the PL-HIV, people living with HIV, or, as you said, the LGBTQIA communities. And I think, the way that we are taking forward our interventions is truly based on the learnings that actually we did have and we have amassed through the last 20, 25 years of our HIV intervention. We're starting, as you said, right from stigma and how to deal with this stigmatizing environment which this virus has actually put forth, where we have seen umpteen number of stories where people infected with COVID are also isolated, and, the fear, overrides the minds of people, than, turning themselves into comforting, people around them rather, or caring communities, but then the fear actually steps up the stigma. With the same was true for HIV. If you look back, there are incidents and stories that we are reading about, HIV, how it was actually treated in the initial days. People were actually taken out of the, the villages, and they were ousted from schools. There are so many stories that we can actually take. But, currently, if you take all those, learnings from the HIV field, I think we are much equipped to deal with, stigma surrounding these communities. But at the same time, there is also this question that, how are these people differently affected, But I would say that, as I said, it's an equalizer. But being immunocompromised is something that, again, puts greater risk to our communities.
Mr. Ashok, I would like to come to you here. Like we were talking about the fear, stigma, the precautions one need to take. How have the rights of the community been affected by the coronavirus pandemic?
In more ways than one, I think we have got further stigmatized. That's, of course, to be put on the table. But the point is that everybody's rights seem to have been snatched away all of a sudden. What do you do when a chief minister suddenly locks down or extends the lockdown of a city by another 1 week? We must understand that mostly LGBT are more frequent in public spaces. That's where we mostly are there, like male sex workers. People, for example, stuck at home have a huge problem because of the stigma of being, say, gay or lesbian or transgender, and being in the house with family members who do not appreciate or don't accept your sexuality it can be incredibly depressing. And there are mental health issues here coming up, which we are trying to sort out. What happens when a transgender person can't be himself and can't go out of the house at all because the family doesn't let him? He can't go out because of the lockdown. So there is a stigma within a stigma. So we learned something from HIV that, sexuality had a lot to do with our stigma, as far as HIV was concerned. But here, there's another issue. There's a stigma within a stigma in the sense COVID seems to be directly indicative of comorbidities, and you are in bigger danger and a higher danger. So you have to be always alert about certain things like taking supplements, vitamin supplements, social distancing, all that sort of thing is there. And let me tell you, LGBT are really suffering. For example, transgender sex workers. Most of them have been thrown out of their rented premises in places like, say, Dharavi and all. So they are on the street. At the same time, no business, so there's no food. A lot of organizations, LGBT organizations, are giving dry rations and daily meal tickets and that sort of thing to transgender sex workers. At the same time, within the home, there is an enormous amount of domestic violence against LGBT. So all along the line, we are getting bashed up. So I just wonder where to start and where to end, because it's a continuous. On one side, you have HIV, which is a stigmatizing disease because of your sexuality, and it was something that we fought against and we won. But this is something that is taking us nowhere. We don't seem to be able to adjust, or neither does society want to adjust. That they want to one size fits all for everybody.
So I think even what you spoke about mental health, we're going to be coming back to that. Let me go first to Lakshmi ji. The first question I want to ask you is, the trans community is one such section of society that is at the front lines of this crisis, like Ashok had also just said. And it is difficult times. The government welfare schemes have come. There have been financial aids that have been announced. During the COVID-19, is the transgender community part of this bucket? How many have actually benefited from these schemes? What are the needs that these people need right now, Lakshmi ji?
See, I had a meeting with the secretary, and the secretary said 5,000 people were given 1,500 rupees in this 4 month. Only 1,500 rupees, and 1,500 rupees doesn't, it is nothing, it's peanuts. Like, we can need services. Like whether it was me, Manish, or Aryan Pasha, who is a trans man, we all supplied dry ration as far as Northeast, Manipur, Nagaland, Mizoram, Assam, and now even to the southmost to Madurai, Coimbatore. We associated with Donate Cart, and still the campaign is on. And 38,000 kits all over India, we have given dry rations. And we got associated with many. But the whole thing is that in the rural areas also, in the villages, there is a pathetic condition. People are hungry for 10 days. They're drinking, what we say, only water, and they are having that lai chana, what you say, no? That. Yeah. And the whole thing is about, for transgender, it has become, the badhais have gone, whether it is a traditional community, whether it is sex worker community, whether people who are begging, or the religious community, everything works upon a round of this. It's a complete round circle of economic, thing, that if there is a business, people will give money. If there is a stability in economy, transgender people's stomachs are filled, whether it is sex worker now. Even for sex work also, people have to go and stand on the streets. Even for begging, they have to stand at the signals. Yeah, but the whole pathetic situation is that people now are putting their lives into danger. With COVID, with what not other infections people are high risk with HIV. Though we have learned our lessons with the HIV virus, but how does it help when you don't have food and when you don't have money to give rent? When you're going on streets, now there are a big chunk of population which are coming on street. It's 4 months.
Yeah.
The problem is that when a middle class also is getting affected in this 4 months, there only one state in this country is Manipur.
Yeah, I was just coming to that. Which has a quarantine, yeah.
For a transgender, there is Delhi, there is other transgender children are trans man, trans women are facing immense of violence. Trans men, children are in a much more grave situation, because see, at times there are good stories to hear, but the maximum is still that the trans men, biologically born women, who are forced to accept their sexuality as women, they have been raped, they have been tortured. There is no kind of facilities. There is no shelter homes. There are 200 project which is lying with the secretary, and nobody is working upon them. I had a meeting with the ministry secretary, and I asked them that at least the urban cities in this country should have shelter homes with providing of food, shelter, everything, and their security.
Yeah.
This thing has to happen. And when we have had HIV virus and now it is the COVID virus, we have to learn what was the good points with the virus during HIV. And now when you talk about stigma and discrimination, I believe the people are self-stigmatizing their own people, whether it is male, female, LGBTI community, everybody is scared.
Ravi, I would like to ask you here that, we have been working on the Banega Swasth India campaign for 6 years. Reckitt Benckiser is committed to bring about a change on ground, and it is important for corporates to step in. What are you all doing for the LGBTQ population and COVID-19?
We are been supporting 10 state governments in India, the COVID-19 task force. Along with that, working with 40,000 plus HIV positive people in India. It's a sense of deep gratitude to the people of India. Like we are chosen to basically serve all these communities, including LGBTQ plus populations. We're working on the mental health support. We are working on the medical support because of the ART centers not operational at some places, etc., etc. There's some people who are facing stigma within the family because it's a long lockdown where people were they were never open to their families, and the family support system was not there for them. So through Humsafar Trust, we are trying to work with these populations, the LGBTQ plus populations, so that we can reach out to 1 million plus people in India and can help them on the food security, on health security, as well as the mental health. Because these are the three big challenges which are being identified through our work on the ground.
Lakshmi ji, I would like to come to you here again, and I would like to ask you that, if the strategy is most recommended to control the spread of COVID-19, whether it's social distancing, what we were talking about, hygiene, hand washing, wearing masks, but many a times what we were talking about, the shelter place, people don't have place to stay. The transgender individuals, the communities are very densely populated. So can they actually practice social distancing? So what we were just talking about.
I believe social distancing is only for the upper socio-economic strata people. What happened in Dharavi? How do you do social distancing when you have 20 people staying in one place? For example, even my house, somebody was tested, we 17 days, things was like we all had quarantined ourselves.
So if there is no space, where do you quarantine? How do you actually follow the precautions, the safety?
We don't have big houses for everybody, in this country.
Yeah, it's true, yeah. Even practicing social distancing and hygiene practices is a huge challenge for the community.
A huge challenge. There is one bathroom in a house how you will tell people, what is quarantine means then? That everybody is using the same bathroom. Do people who don't have food to eat, who don't have money to give for their rents, where do you tell them to buy sanitization, or buy, things which can sanitize their houses?
So Sam, while Lakshmi ji, Ashok ji have spoken to us, about the challenges what the community has been facing, AHF has been working during these tough times. What are the challenges you've seen with the people living with HIV? What are their challenges during the COVID-19 pandemic?
Ambika, I should just start by saying that we are so thankful to our clients, our community, as well as our supporters, and as well as our staff. Not even closing down even for single day after the lockdown. The very first lockdown was announced since March 23rd, okay. And we have been consistently working till today. And we extended to one more day in the week, from 5-day a week to a 6-day week. And then we were trying to, serve as much as possible. I think the basic challenges were all laid out here. It's also all about, poverty, unemployment-driven poverty is a basic, problem with these communities. And then, we are an organization which gives out, services to almost 2,800, 3,000, close to 3,000 people living with HIV, which includes men, women, children, transgender, LGBTQI, all kinds of, strata of people. And, as, one of the experts of the panel said, it's not about, the middle class or the upper middle class can probably, survive in these tough times. But what we often hear from our clients when they come for the replenishment of their ART, that is, we have started giving out multi-month dispensation of ART medicines, which are like the lifesavers for these people, because the adherence level, to keep that adherence level of, medicine in their body is very much essential.
Yes.
And if you, get a, sort of a drug vacation, give a drug vacation, or if you don't adhere to the medication, of course, your risk of, absolutely. I mean, it is like, it's a life, changer, basically, in the sense that it goes negative. So, all these stories, that they have been telling is all about, livelihoods and, issues of, rations and all that.
Coming to you, Dr. Rajesh, you have also spoken, like Dr. Sam just said, the need for adherence to treatment, the antiretroviral treatment is extremely important. So do you think access to HIV medicines has been impacted due to the COVID-19 pandemic, especially with the lockdown, the migrant workers going back to the villages? So what is the state of Gujarat doing to help these people so that they can get their medication?
It is mandatory and it's vitally important that a person having AIDS takes his or her antiretroviral drugs, the ART, the antiretroviral treatment, on a very regular basis. So even in the lockdown period, the various non-governmental organizations, the NGOs, other partners from civil society, many governmental organizations, they provided vehicular support to the GSACs, which is the implementing agency for AIDS control in the state of Gujarat, and the network of people living with HIV, GSNP+. And I'm very happy to share with you, even in the lockdown period, we could ensure that not a person missed his or her antiretroviral drugs. Similarly, when we are trying to contain COVID-19, we utilize the services of PLHIV, our counselors, our NGOs, and so many other partners in communicating the right information to the people, as we have been doing in AIDS control, to ensure adequate behavior change in personal behavior, the sexual behavior. Similarly, some of the social behavior, which is not very difficult to change. It is just a mindset that we need to have a curfew, a lockdown to ensure these basic precautions. We have to live with the new time. The COVID-19 is not going to just disappear in a month or a year. It will continue for quite some time, and we have to ensure all the basic precautions. Certain communities for which we have been working very dedicatedly for decades are one of the most marginalized communities of the society, whether they are the transgenders, the Kinnar community, the Hijras, or the female sex workers, people who inject drugs, injecting drug users, or the migrant people. They all are fairly marginalized, and we can see the effect of COVID-19 in one of the communities very visibly, the migrant population. People who had to move out from different states to their hometowns in a very big numbers. So all those vulnerabilities get exposed to further predisposition to acquisition of other infections if we do not empower those communities.
Manvinder, here I would like to ask you, you've been in the closet for 41 years. How big a challenge was it for you to come out in the open and talk about your sexuality?
It was difficult for me to come out, being the first member of a royal family in the world to openly come out as gay. It was not just challenging, but it was going against the current, because everyone was opposing me, and it was difficult to meet with the stigma and discrimination which I faced. My effigies were burnt in the fire. My own parents took out newspaper advertisements publicly disowning me and publicly disinheriting me from the family properties. But I still moved on because I had one very important tool with me, and that was honesty and truthfulness. and that paved the way to me. And finally, it is always said that honesty wins.
Ashokji, I would like to come here and ask you, it's been nearly 2 years since the Article 377 judgment, when the community became free and, everything was like, now things will be normal, the community, people will accept them. And now with COVID-19, the pandemic, do you think there are going to be long-term disruptions? How long will it actually take for things to get normal?
I think after Section 377 was read down, we are really in a vacuum. We don't know exactly the priorities. We've not been able to prioritize what exactly we should ask for as citizenship entitlement. Do you want same-sex marriages first? Do you want, for example, simple things like the trans bill, for example? It is the transgender protection bill was horrible. Do we have to fight to redo it? Simple things like they want medical boards to give a certificate. That's not acceptable. So what do we want? And that has not yet really got the community together. Section 377 had brought the community together. Now it has sort of fragmented. Transgender want a certain something important like the transgender protection bill. The gay men want recognition of same-sex rights. The inclusive and diverse, section of inclusive workplaces, for example. How do we get them? How do we sensitize corporates or even schools to inclusivity and diversity?
So a lot of important things have been pushed back, right? That's what you're trying to say. Yes. What you're actually...
Absolutely. The human rights of LGBT have been pushed back. Although there is an effort by the LGBT think tanks, the various sort of community networks that are coming together. We're trying to bring it back together, but it's not that easy.
So it is going to take a while. Ravi, just coming to you here quickly, the project with Reckitt Benckiser, where communities make the difference, y'all are trying to reach out to 1 million LGBTQ population in a period of 3 years. So what are your key focus areas, especially since we've discussed that what are the challenges, so what are y'all focusing at?
Very interesting. RB has committed to reach out to 1 million, LGBTQ plus population in India across a period of 3 years. In India, we have partnered through Humsafar Trust, which played a very important role in fighting against Article 377. And in then you have the CBOs, which are the community-based organizations, which are under the banner of InfoSem. So RB has been supporting mental health, RB is supporting, sexual health and sexual well-being. RB is also been supporting, the food security. These are the three main pillars of our work at this moment. And we actually signed up this partnership before, COVID-19 came. So we are also seeing and we are also looking into what more we can do online and offline so that maximum people can get benefited. And the whole focus is on actually reaching out to the last quintile population in the LGBTQ plus populations also. Because if we can't bring equality, at least we strive to bring equity through our programs.
So it's time for a quick break. We're just going to come back and we're going to keep this discussion on. Welcome back. Ravi, I'm going to start with you here. Awareness is the key to break away from taboos. Many a time we don't talk to our children at the right time. Comprehensive sexuality program or adolescent education, that's a very important aspect. What is your take on that?
The anecdote is, I was reading a newspaper report recently where, it was put a young boy who was locked during this lockdown in the house. He never revealed to his parents about his sexuality. And, living 3 months together with the parents, parents said, when he opened up with his parents, so parents said, get lost and go out from this house. I believe, how world is changing and there is after lifting of Article 377 and all, this is the right time to educate, to educate youth, educate adolescents on the gender norms, about sexuality, about the people who are from LGBTQ plus populations, and it should not be seen something which is which is very different. There's a lot of problems this whole community faces. There's a lot of challenges which are there, and there are not safe spaces for the population groups, the LGBTQ plus population groups, to speak out. There are few drop-in centers, DICs, which are supported by NACO and which are supported by National AIDS Control Program in various states. So this is a time to strengthen the places which have been created under the National AIDS Control Program.
Dr. Sam, I would also like to come to you here and ask you, what is the role of adolescent education and prevention of sexually transmitted infections and pregnancies? Also, do you think, in India, where is the stigma, we've been talking about the stigma to LGBTQ community. Even in India, the general talk about sex, does it make it even more difficult to spread awareness about safe sex practices? Dr. Sam?
We graduated into something called life skill education, and then again, you are not even calling it sex education or gender sexuality education, you're packaging it in something like life skill education. And the rant or the argument was that, we should always think about our culture, the ethos, the pathos of our Indian morality and things like that. But I would like also to ask a very, open question. I think, this has to go out as a question to India. Who gave Kama Sutra to the world? Think about that, a society where, it is all inclusive. It is seen as something which is part of human nature, part of a divine, thing. And then we had that kind of an inclusive societies where, temple art forms had depicted sex and sexuality in its purest forms, in its, most ardent and open forms. From there, what happened? How did we become this kind of a very closed community where we even fear, talking about sex, sexuality, gender education? This is something which is baffling,
So that's something we need to again think. Like you said, it's an open question. We need to think back.
I think, Ambika, let me just, I will just conclude by saying only one thing.
Yeah.
If those, gender sexuality education topics or, those kind of discussions don't happen as part of a family tea, coffee discussion, or a dinner table discussion, or a discussion inside the family, I'm sure our generation and the coming generations are going to depend upon Google and the internet, and get into all kinds of information which are not truly the best of the information that I would say, and the choices are extremely wide, and they would, people might be even lured into many things which are highly unscientific and I don't know, you can't even think or explain about it. I think this is the opening that we should have. I think that's why I said, I think this COVID-19 is an equalizer. There are opportunities like that. Think about all these, youngsters, parents living together now, because, all these parents who are working from home, children are studying from home, they are on internet sessions and all that. Make use of those opportunities to talk about gender, sexuality, education right from.
So, Ashok, just coming to you, like you said, you said it's very important to talk about to your children. That's where, again, we come on to family support. Especially at a time, with COVID-19 pandemic, many of us are confined in our homes. And these people, the community, the marginalized people cannot even talk to their parents about it. So how important is parent support?
Parent support is vital, because what is happening is it's like a solitary prison. You are not allowed to go out. You can't talk to anybody. At the most, you're on the phone or you're on your mobile. What type of, there has to be some socialization. There has to be, trans people have to know each other. They have to go out with each other. They have to meet each other. As good old Lakshmi said, there's no badhai. There's no sort of sex work. And most of this is in public spaces. What happens to us? I don't think there is parental support, which is very, very necessary. We have, for example, I think Humsafar has a fantastic group called Swikar of parents of LGBT. And they actually give each other homework, on the gender studies, sexuality studies. But the point is that it's a boutique thing. It has to become an all-India movement that parents have to support their children for sex and sexuality education.
Maninder, coming back to you here, how important it is for parents to support their children's sexuality? Because many a times, parents want to hide it, or the kids don't want to tell their parents. So why is it that parents need to support their children?
See, it is important for the parents to support the children because What the child needs is the love and affection from the parent, whether he or she or they is gay, lesbian, trans, whatever. And parents should understand the child better, because they have the ones who have brought up that child. So it is of utmost importance that when a child comes out to the parent, that instead of disregarding or disrespecting that individual and throwing him or her or them out of the home, they should try and understand the issues. And these days I'm seeing that a lot of parents are understanding, and there is an organization also called Swikar, which has been started by parents, which are trying to help out other parents to understand their children, whether they are gay, lesbian, trans, or belonging to any sexual diversity community.
Manipur, that's the only state which has opened the first transgender, dedicated quarantine center to accommodate the people coming from different states. So how important is the need to talk about emotional security? So mental health, that's something again we need to talk about.
See, mental health becomes the biggest thing, because they're maximum even today in India and in in India, whole of India. See, till now there is nothing, nobody talks about the mental, even the department in the private, public sector hospitals also run by the government. There also there is nothing about mental health. And see, today the amount of suicide rates have been increasing, the amount of things, and you require somebody very famous, to make your head turn about, emotional matters, about being stable, there are so many people who get panic attack only by knowing the fact that somebody is, asymptomatic positive person, for example, if is there. But then people get, how you will bring people to normal, how you will give them support mentally, because the whole thing, these all things come later. First things come, the first is shelter, food, medical assessment, but medical assistance with dignity is one of the issues still we all are dealing in this whole corona period. And now then people don't think about the mental state. That anxiety also comes as an illness for people, and then there is nothing which one can do. And I have seen and I have experienced that if you're very strong and if your willpower is really very strong, you can fight many diseases, whether it is corona or whether it was HIV thing, But one thing is there, for the community, these things come later. First thing is shelter. Second is food. Third is medical assistance with dignity. I just urge that people have to stand consciously to see to it that people may not die of COVID, but may die of hunger.
Appeal to the nation that, again, let me just bring back, this is a, sort of a, common platform that we are put in right now. It's sort of an equalizer. But we need to take care of these LGBTQI communities and the PLHIV communities with utmost care, and then they are part of the, mainstream community. We should not isolate them. We should mainstream them, and that is for the total good of, everybody in this nation. And this is one of the times that we should do that and move forward.
Sir, you have experienced COVID-19 very closely. In fact, many healthcare workers have lost their jobs. You've seen how they've been working. The medical fraternity are increasingly facing discrimination. I mean, talk about stigma. They too are facing it. And they're facing it because they're trying to actually protect us. So what is your take on that?
Actually, this is one thing which makes me actually very, very sad, seeing doctors when in need, when they become COVID positive themselves, not getting admissions in the hospital. My big salute to all the frontline workers, to all the sanitation workers, to all healthcare workers, to all doctors who are putting long, long hours to save Indians and India. Just imagine a 14 days regular, job, what you are doing 24/7, and then you go into quarantine, and when you go home, your neighbors don't, welcome you back. They create fuss for you. So, and many patients also admitted in the hospitals, they create a lot of fuss with these doctors. There are utmost pressures because there's a family waiting for these doctors, nurses, paramedics, and sanitation workers, all of them. So, in our own personal capacity, we should not forget, like, if these guys will be, if these guys, if these guys will be not there for us, the mortality rate will go really, really high. And we need to salute these guys, and,
A significant thread are the healthcare workers across the country who've been supporting people living with HIV and other infections for decades now. They are working relentlessly at the forefront in the battle against coronavirus. As we await the vaccine for this virus, let's salute these heroes for their constant support to protect each one of us. Let's learn lessons from the HIV response to battle COVID-19 and also put the marginalized communities at the center of the intervention. Thank you so much for watching.